everyone, welcome to a special episode of Gripe. I'm going to be talking about X-Men Apocalypse a little bit more. This is going to be my spoiler-full review as opposed to my spoiler-less review from before. So if you want to see my just spoilerless review of X-Men Apocalypse, give my rating and kind of my general thoughts on the movie, check out the first video. In this one, it's going to be a little bit more about why I was so disappointed in this movie, and also kind of in the context of what we've seen this year for movies, with Civil War, with Deadpool, with Batman v Superman, kind of how it failed even harder than than people might, give it credit for. I mean, people know that it failed, but I mean, it really failed. So here, I mean, I'm going to definitely be having some spoilers and, obviously talk about movies like Civil War because I haven't talked about those enough. I really haven't. So what went wrong with this movie? There's so much opportunity for this movie to be good. I mean, you have the young cast, that made First Class and Days of Future Past such good movies, plus adding in new characters. They brought in, Sophie Turner to play Jean Grey. They got Ty Sheridan and to play Cyclops, Cody Smith-McPhee to play Nightcrawler. So they got this cast of young people to start playing the younger versions of the characters that we've come to know and love from the original X-Men trilogy. So, and I'm not going to say that they did a bad job, but the problem is that this is a universe that has already built the team multiple times. They built the team in X-Men First Class. It kind of broke up. They killed a bunch of them off in Days of Future Past, and so they got to bring some more people in. Now they're building that team again. But they're doing it in the context of, this threat that's happening, Apocalypse coming back from, ancient times and basically coming back with the sole purpose of, destroying the world and rebuilding it in his own image for some unknown reason. There's no explanation given to why he wants to do this, just because he can or because he wants to. It doesn't matter. He's such a cliche villain, and that is disappointing. So, what made this movie go so wrong? The first is that they tried to cram too much into it, and that's saying something in a year that had Batman v Superman. This year we've had 3 team-building movies so far. We've also had, one other comic book movie that wasn't about building a team, it was about a lone wolf. And obviously that one worked really well because that lone wolf actually had some character to him, and they gave the character some, depth and some intrigue, as opposed to this movie where they basically bring in Apocalypse and he is just a faceless cartoon villain. He might as well be a Power Rangers villain in this movie. He doesn't have any, he's got powers, he's pretty strong, he's kind of vicious, and he seems pretty intent on what he's doing, but that doesn't mean he's got any depth to him. They don't give him the kind of Magneto backstory that you want. Speaking of Magneto, here's a character that we have seen in so many different iterations and has done so much over the course of 9 X-Men movies. And in this one, he basically is still kind of fighting from fighting off what he did at the end of Days of Future Past. It's sort of this good guy, bad guy. He's always towing that line. And what happens in this movie is he's off in Poland, he's living his own life, he has a wife, he actually has a daughter who has some powers, and I can't tell if they were trying to do Scarlet Witch or if they just wanted to give her some, just insert generic mutant powers here. But basically when, he gets discovered that he is Magneto, they, turn on him and end up, killing his wife and daughter with a bow and arrow. This kind of sets him off, and so he kills all of the the people who who are there to arrest him, and then he goes to his metal factory to basically take care of everybody there. But that moment is supposed to have some weight to it. I mean, that moment is supposed to be character building, and it's not. I mean, we've already seen Magneto with losing somebody right before his eyes in X-Men First Class. In fact, that one had some serious depth to it. Like, that one was incredible because you had, basically him just like unleashing his power as a child. In this one, his wife and child die. He takes the necklace off and just uses the necklace to kill everybody. It's but it doesn't have that kind of weight to it that we saw in X-Men First Class. But this is supposed to be the moment that turns Magneto dark again. This is the one that gets him. It's like, okay, I'm not going to hide anymore. I'm just going to go on a killing spree and do all that. But it it fails, and part of it's because Fassbender from that point on is kind of a zombie in the movie. He becomes Apocalypse's, one of his four horsemen, and Apocalypse shows him, you can take the metal from the earth and destroy the earth that way, which ultimately leads to one of the biggest problems with this movie. And and then Magneto is now, one of Apocalypse's lackeys, and from that moment on, he is just a zombie. There's nothing dynamic about his character. We learned some stuff. We learned that Quicksilver is his son, which was implied in Days of Future Past but wasn't explicitly stated. So, now, what I said was one of the biggest problems of this movie with Magneto. At the end of the movie, Apocalypse basically tells them to just, he basically tells Magneto to unleash that fury and just destroy the world. He basically is using Magneto to destroy the world by just, basically ripping out all the metal in the earth to do so. So what happens is basically every city, all civilization around the world is being destroyed by Magneto. And yet, somehow, in this movie, in this very comic-y, very cheesy type of movie, they don't even acknowledge the fact that they probably had just killed millions of people. Just millions of people are dead. Now, I read somewhere that the filmmakers wanted to kind of get away from that implication by saying, oh, they just took away rooftops and bridges and stuff like that. It doesn't matter. Even if they killed like 2 or 3 people, he's still murdering people for absolutely no reason other than because Apocalypse said, let's destroy the world and build a new one, right? Basically, so all these people are dying, and at the end of the movie, Magneto and Xavier are like, basically just like, we cool? We cool? All right, cool. And then that's it. They murder people and then just walk away. Because this movie has no morality. This movie doesn't address any of that stuff. It doesn't care if he kills Magneto's wife and daughter. It especially doesn't care if they kill Havoc. Havoc dies in this movie. Spoiler. They kill off Havoc, and no one seems to care. No one actually cares that they killed off the character. And that annoyed the hell out of me, because this is during the Quicksilver scene when he basically does his best impression of Philip J. Fry when he's had 100 cups of coffee. Basically, as the X-Mansion is blowing up, because Apocalypse basically, teleported there, and then as Havoc was about to attack him, he teleported away, and Havoc ended up blowing up the, I don't even know what he blew up, but he blew something up that ultimately blew up the entire mansion. And then as the mansion is blowing up, Quicksilver is basically saving everybody from the blast. He's, doing his thing, just like he did in Future Past, but in this case, he's like picking people up and throwing them. So somehow physics don't apply to Quicksilver at all. Obviously he can run fast, but apparently apparently because he can run fast, everything else becomes weightless and has no mass or anything like that. So, yeah, he can just pick things up and just... Like, apparently that physics part of it doesn't apply. They gave Quicksilver, like, almost godlike powers in his speed-up moments, and yet somehow Apocalypse just, like, flicks him and, he's, is able to, slow down. It's very inconvenient. It's very weird how Quicksilver's powers, like, become super strong and then super, like, normal in a span of, like, 5 minutes. They need to pick a power that he has or not. But back to Havoc. They basically, during that scene, while Quicksilver is doing all of his stuff, Havoc is dying. And then when he dies, and Quicksilver's like, oh, I got everybody, right? And they're like, no, Havoc was closest to the blast. He's like, oh. Cyclops, goes over to, like, look at the wreckage, and there's, like, this just, like, half a second of, like, my brother is dead. And that's it. That's all it gets. I know Havoc isn't necessarily, like, this super important character. I should have seen it coming that, Havoc was in Days of Future Past only briefly when Mystique was in, basically saving mutants in Vietnam. So we know he's been in these movies since X-Men First Class. Here, he has a bigger role, a little bit more expanded role, which is good. Lucas Till's a decent actor, and, it's good to see that character. But here, I mean, they basically brought him back in to kill him, kind of like, you know, it's just like, well, we brought him in, we're gonna kill him. That'll give Cyclops a reason to fight, but it doesn't almost. I mean, Cyclops doesn't really embrace that very well. I mean, it's just like, I mean, I guess it could if if there is a 23-year age difference, as the messed up timeline that they presented us in this movie suggests, then maybe yeah, he doesn't care. It's like, oh, that sucks. My brother just died, but they don't give any kind of like real meaning to it. They don't give it any weight. They don't give it any emotion. They give it 5 seconds because that's really all the character building that they're able to give any of these characters. Nightcrawler gets a brief scene. Jean Grey is supposed to be like the character. I mean, in the end, Jean Grey is the character that people should fear, which we all knew from watching X-Men The Last Stand. Jean Grey, when she goes Dark Phoenix, she is unstoppable. And here in this movie, she's the one who kills Apocalypse because she embraces that part. But you can see that coming. The problem is they don't give you any like real character development up to that point. They give little bits and pieces, but each character, aside from Professor X, Magneto, and Apocalypse, none of them get much in terms of character development. And even the character development that those characters get is minimal. So this movie is just they tried to pack too much into it, like I said, which, I mean, in a year that we've had two other team building movies, and this one is the weakest, I mean, that's really painful, because I mean, you look at Batman v Superman. Basically, Batman watches Superman destroy a city, and that's why he is so hell-bent on stopping Superman from basically existing, because he is that dangerous. He sees that, and the movie deals with that in a really good way. They deal with, kind of like the moral implications of having somebody of Superman's strength in the world, having his capabilities in the world. And in terms of like the team building part of it, they kind of shoehorn Wonder Woman in there, but I mean, they at least give her some development. That she's only there really to get something back, but when she sees that things are going wrong, she decides to jump in and help out. Batman gets a lot of character development. You see a lot of that. Superman doesn't get a ton, but you start to see some of that there. And then they introduce the future characters of the Justice League. They don't throw them in there like as like, hey, look, Aquaman's here, or hey, Cyborg, what's up? I mean, they don't throw them in there just like because they can. It wasn't like, opening up a van door and Ant-Man being there. Civil War. Anyhow, but I mean, at least they gave some, characters some time to develop. Obviously in X-Men, when you have so many characters, it's a little bit harder to do that. But Civil War did that. Civil War had almost as many characters as Apocalypse, and they were still able to give characters some development. Now, the focus, though, this is why it was important that for Civil War and even Batman v Superman, that the focus was on a limited number of characters. They kept the focus on Captain America, Bucky, Iron Man, and kind of had Zemo in the background doing this stuff, as well as Black Panther, sort of his rise. In this movie, I mean, the characters that they should have focused on would have been Jean Grey, because she's the one who, in the end, she's the one who pretty much saves the day. Apocalypse, to give him more weight other than this just, I want to destroy the world and see who survives. I mean, that's his motive. I mean, it would be amazing if, I mean, you looked at it like the Joker does, but the problem is that's not what we're doing. The Joker is just kind of one of those things. He acts on chaos because that's, chaos is fun for him. Whereas here, it's just like, I'm going to destroy the world, see who survives. But why? What's the point? What drove him to do that? Somebody betrayed him once upon a time. Is that why he did that? Or, I mean, is it the knowledge that somebody else might betray him? I mean, there's nothing behind it. You can read into it. You can pick certain things out and say, well, maybe this is why it happened, or maybe this is it. But ultimately, what they give us is an Apocalypse who just kind of does and doesn't care why he's doing it. He just does. Magneto, they give him one moment, and then after that, he's a zombie until they kind of break him out of his, it's like, oh, I shouldn't listen to this guy, and then he kind of fights back. Professor X, he, is kind of this just like college, jock, college like, doofus character for the first half of the movie, and then when he actually does, have a little fight, I mean, there's nothing really new there. So I guess my biggest point, my point here is that, I mean, other movies this year have already shown us that you can do team building, and you can have these ensemble movies that work without necessarily losing sight of, individual characters, or like, I mean, we didn't need a huge Ant-Man like backstory in Civil War. He just showed up because, it made the fight more fun. Spider-Man, they gave him a little bit of backstory, but we didn't need the whole thing. Here, we didn't really get anything. I mean, we got like a little bit of Cyclops. I mean, he was bullied in high school and then somehow comes back, and it's like, are you fighting against another bully, or are you avenging your brother? I mean, what's your motivation here? Then you got Jean Grey, who's just like, I have this power that I shouldn't use. Okay, I'm going to use it now. I mean, if the second act of this movie did more to build the characters and to like really get into who they are, kind of I want to say like Avengers had the first Avengers movie did a really good job of dividing the three acts. Even if the third act was really cheesy and, kind of cliche, the middle act had that character building time. Whereas this one, it was more just like Apocalypse, doing his thing. People like, oh, what are we going to do against him? And then just, I mean, there almost wasn't a second act in this movie. The first act was, building up Apocalypse's team. The second act was kind of the turn. It's like, oh, now I want Professor X. He's the power I need. And like going to get him, and then that whole thing lasts all of about 15 minutes, and then we get into the third act, which is just this epic battle scene. And the lack of character development in a movie like this hurts, because X-Men is one of those franchises that is so driven by its characters. And I mean, we saw the same thing with X-Men The Last Stand, is, they focus so much on the spectacle that they forgot about the characters. And I think we're beyond that, aren't we? I mean, aren't we beyond that as, movie-going public? When we're watching comic book movies, we want something on the caliber of a Guardians of the Galaxy or Civil War, as opposed to Daredevil, or as opposed to like Ghost Rider, one of these movies that it's so shallow and so basic, and it's made with this just very cliched formula. And it's like, you got a bad guy, you got a good guy who has to figure themselves out, and then fight the bad guy in an epic scene. Like, that's kind of what the formula was. X-Men was the one who really did a good job of setting up the modern formula, for getting Marvel into into like our cinematic universe. But we've moved on beyond that. I mean, we've seen that you can do so much more with, the MCU is nailing it. The MCU is absolutely a brilliant, structure. I mean, what they've done from the very beginning is so much better than what anybody else has ever done. And it continues to work because they know you can't just keep making Thor. You can't keep doing an origin story of Captain America. You can't do the same thing over again and expect people to want to go back to the movies. You need something like Civil War that gives you that similar feeling, but then throws a wrench in the spokes. Or like Winter Soldier, that takes two completely different genres, throws them together, and gives you this fantastic story that you weren't expecting. Even Batman v Superman, it gives you a lot more of the morality. I mean, it's a lot darker, a lot heavier, but there's a lot more of the morality behind it. X-Men, when it first came out, was this great movie talking about tolerance, acceptance, and believing in people, and that message is gone. It's so long gone. X-Men First Class really started to kind of build it back up again, and then you get Days of Future Past, which was a great exercise in trying to take one of these complicated comic book plots and actually making it into a movie. And now Apocalypse, it's just like, we don't have any more ideas. We're out of ideas. So let's make X-Men The Last Stand Part 2. It's almost like this was the X-Men The Last Stand that Bryan Singer would have given us if he hadn't gone on to do Superman Returns, which was another one of those just like overblown, epic, by the book, just formulaic superhero movies. There's a reason Superman Returns failed. Well, there's a lot of reasons why it failed, but one of the big ones is because it it was meh. There was nothing really special about it. There was nothing memorable about it. And here we have Apocalypse. There's nothing memorable in this movie either. Apocalypse isn't even that vicious of a villain. He, decapitates a few people with sand, but then after that, what does he do? He, beats up a cripple and then, tries to just, have his minions destroy the world for him. I mean, there's not a lot to that character, and unfortunately, we are beyond that. We are better than that now. I mean, we know now what we can get, and especially when you have stuff like what Marvel's doing with Netflix, of like really making these character-driven stories, comic book stories, because that's what comic books are about. The plots are awesome, but it's the characters that draw us in. There's a reason all of us love Deadpool, because Deadpool is one of those characters that he's become such an icon for how his character has developed. And what's awesome about Deadpool is his character has developed in so many different ways that it makes it even more fun. But I mean, characters like Wolverine have such a detailed story, which is, I mean, the Wolverine, the movie that the last Wolverine solo movie. What I enjoyed it thoroughly because it gave a lot more to Wolverine and than just this like you know metal boned killing machine, which is kind of what he is, but there's other layers to it. And that's why having these individual stories are better than the ensemble pieces. I mean, you can build up to an ensemble piece as long as you have that character foundation in there. And I think X-Men is really starting to lag behind, like really far behind the MCU, because they're not building their characters anymore. They're just saying, okay, well, we're going to throw this character in here now. They put Jubilee in the movie again. This is like the third or fourth time Jubilee has been in an X-Men movie, and she's still not doing anything. But then again, she shouldn't. All she does is fireworks. That's not a superpower. Or if it is, it's a really lame superpower. But even Storm is in this movie. She gets like no development. This is like the origin of Storm, and they show it how she really did, originate. She was found, like stealing, she was basically a poor thief is what she was, but she had this power, and then Apocalypse, finds her and imbues her with, more strength, and then somehow at the end of the movie she just decides, oh wait, I do like Mystique, so I'm not going to follow you anymore, Apocalypse. I mean, it there's no development, there's no depth, and I keep saying it, we're beyond this. We're doing better than this now. The MCU is setting a standard that is going to be almost impossible for X-Men to achieve if they don't change their formula. If Bryan Singer continues to direct X-Men movies this way, we're going to get the next X-Men movie, which, they teased Mr. Sinister at the end of this one, as well as X-23. All they're doing is just like, okay, here are the next characters we're going to throw at you. And you could say the MCU is doing the same thing, or that DC did the same thing, that they're just throwing characters at you. But the difference is that the MCU has been building that over years, and as they bring in new characters, they're bringing in new concepts as well. We're going to get Doctor Strange. Doctor Strange is going to be completely new. We're going to get Black Panther. Black Panther is going to be completely different. We're getting new concepts, and they're continually reinventing themselves, which is what's making the MCU so good. Batman v Superman was not what they wanted, did not nurture the image that Warner Brothers has for the DCU, but that doesn't mean that it's garbage. It doesn't mean it's broken, because we could see James Wan's Aquaman be a fantastic movie. It could be something we completely didn't expect. We know we have stuff coming. We have Wonder Woman coming. I mean, we have all this stuff coming that we could see individual characters built and, nurtured in a way that X-Men Apocalypse just completely failed in that regard. The characters, there weren't any character development. There wasn't any character development in this movie, and it made it hard to watch. It made it hard for me to care. It's like, oh, Jean is suddenly on fire and she's destroying Apocalypse. Awesome. That is really cool. But I don't get any feeling from it because they didn't do a very good job of showing how she is really struggling with the power that she has. It's just like, they say I am the strongest one, and I don't want to, dig deep in there. I can't do it. It's just I mean, it's just kind of like a, I know I have power, but I'm just not comfortable using it. Okay, I mean, that's a reason, I guess. But ultimately, what it comes down to is we're left with this movie that is just, it's so hell bent on giving you this grand, enormous spectacle that they forget about the characters in it. I mean, they could have killed off every character in the movie and you probably wouldn't even notice, because any character that dies, they just kind of, I mean, Angel probably died in the movie. They probably actually killed Angel in the movie. They don't say that he died, but he basically was in the crash. When the plane crashed, he was like on the front of it, and next thing you know, he's just lying in rubble, either unconscious or dead. You don't know, but they don't care, because it's just like, they threw him in there just as one of the four horsemen, and then kind of forgot about him. Same thing with Psylocke. They threw her in there. She has a cool fight scene, and then she just leaves. She just kind of like sees. He's like, I don't like that, and then she leaves. That's it. There's nothing to it. One of the biggest injustices in this movie is the lack of character development, and I can't stress that enough, because without it, why are we going to go see the next X-Men movie? Is it just for the popcorn spectacle? I can go to a Transformers movie if I just want to see a bunch of stupid CGI. And I probably won't, but I could. X-Men, I at least want some depth there, because X-Men was the one that kind of started this like comic book movie with a good social message. It wasn't this just like, farcical, Tim Burton Batman movie. It wasn't this really super cheesy Superman movie. It was something that actually had some, weight behind it, good character development. That's what we want, and that's what we're getting with other universes. Unless X-Men can figure that out, we're stuck with this, just blasé, by the numbers X-Men franchise, and I don't like that. I don't like the wealth of characters that they're holding on to that could very easily go into Sony, or can go into Marvel's hands. If Marvel took hold of these characters, I guarantee you a movie like this would be so much more interesting and so much more engaging, because they actually care about the characters. Whereas in this movie, they don't. They don't care. They kill off Havoc and nobody cares. He's dead. Okay, moving on. They did the same thing in Future Past. It's like, all these characters died. Okay, moving on. No one cares. So, I mean, I could rant and rave about this movie a lot, but ultimately what it comes down to is they dropped the ball, and in a year that's already had 3 comic book movies, it's at the bottom, and far at the bottom. I mean, Civil War and Deadpool. I mean, Deadpool is a pretty cliche movie, but they still managed to make it about the character and make it entertaining. Civil War, excellent movie. Batman v Superman was a good movie. It had a lot of flaws, but it was a good movie. X-Men Apocalypse is such a regression, and it's so much an example of a franchise that doesn't know where it needs to go, or they're so hell-bent on holding on to these characters and trying to continue pumping out these movies so that Marvel doesn't, get these characters, that all we're going to get is the same garbage over and over again. The next movie, we're probably going to get the same garbage, because if they can't get a good story with characters you care about, no one's going to see it. The movie made like $55 million this weekend or something, or like $60 million, which, I mean, it's not terrible, but for a comic book movie these days, it's terrible. Batman v Superman made twice what this one did, so it's pretty bad. And it's only going to get worse unless they, for one, kick Bryan Singer to the curb, bring back Matthew Vaughn. He actually knew what he was doing. And, start to focus on the characters, because they have so many, and they have so many great ones. It's about time they start doing it, because X-Men Apocalypse was a huge letdown. Huge. They might as well just call it Last Stand Part 2. That's what it was. It really was. They even threw Wolverine in there. All he was just, a grunting Weapon X. It's like, okay, thanks for the, fan service. That was it. That's all they care about is, just like, look at this guy. Look at this guy. Oh, he's dead. Who cares? Look at that guy. That's it. That's all these movies have become. There's no development, no depth, and really just makes me angry. Eventually, I'm going to do one of these like bonus episodes about movies that matter, but right now there's a lot of comic book movies, and we're not in the good part of the year anyway, so. But that's my spoilery rant. I'm not even going to call it a review. I'm just going to call it a rant on X-Men Apocalypse. So let me know what you think in the comments. Let me know if you agree, disagree. I'm sure somebody will disagree. But yeah, otherwise, check it out next time on Key Gripe, and I'll see you later.